Dexter Morgan looks completely unbeatable the second you wake up on that table. He's not. Over 4 different shows, a small group of people walked out of a plastic-covered room alive, and fans have been keeping track of them for years. Only 2 people in the entire history of this franchise ever broke out of Dexter's restraints on their own, and both of them were dead within about a week of doing it, which tells you pretty much everything you need to know. Everybody assumes beating Dexter means being stronger than him, or faster, or better with a set of restraints. That is the worst plan on the list. There are 5 real ways to beat this ritual, and they get stronger as we go, because the further you get from fighting him, the better your odds get. The last one has never failed, not once, but you don't get to use it whenever you want, because every method here has a window, and the closer you get to being strapped down, the more of those windows have already shut. Today we are going over the few ways you might actually beat Dexter's ritual, even if only for a little while. Let's start with the one everybody thinks of first, which is fighting. You wake up, you're taped to a table, and your brain goes straight to ripping through whatever is holding your arms down. It's the natural instinct, and the franchise does let it work. Twice. In 4 shows and more than 100 episodes, exactly 2 people tore their way off that table without Dexter deciding to let them. That's the good news. The bad news is what happened to both of them afterward, and it's why I'd put this method dead last, even though it's the only one that doesn't need Dexter's permission. The first one happens in Dexter. Original Sin, Season 1. Episode 4, back when Dexter is barely out of his teens and still working out what he's even doing, his target is a man named Anthony Moretti. And the plan is the same one he'll use for the next 30 years of his life. Knock him out, get him tied down, set up the room, have the conversation, finish it. Except Moretti wakes up way earlier than Dexter expects. He isn't groggy and he isn't confused, he's awake and he's furious, and he fights Dexter hard enough to get out of the room completely and make it to the street. For about 4 seconds, Anthony Moretti is the only person alive who has ever beaten Dexter Morgan. Then a car hits him while Dexter is still chasing him down the road, and he dies right there in the open. The second one is bigger in every sense. Season 2. Episode 1 of the original show, Dexter goes after a gang enforcer called Little Chino, and this time he's supposed to know exactly what he's doing. He's experienced. The routine is locked in. But he ties a man, built like Chino, down with basically nothing but plastic sheeting, which is the kind of mistake he doesn't make when his head is right. Chino tears through it, gets off the table, and walks out of there. He isn't clever about it, and he doesn't trick Dexter into anything. He's just bigger than the plan. And unlike Moretti, he gets to enjoy it for a bit. 1 episode later, Dexter comes back with more of the drug and a much better setup, and Chino is gone. So here's what these two actually prove, and it isn't what most people take from it. Neither of them beat the ritual, they beat Dexter's prep work, which is a completely different thing. Moretti gets out because the young Dexter hasn't figured out how much of the drug a grown man needs or how fast it wears off, and he picked a spot he couldn't control, which is how a public street ends up being 1 bad second away from his table. Chino gets out because Dexter is falling apart in his own head at that exact point in the show. He had just killed his own brother, a detective was glued to him every hour of the day, and he'd already failed to kill somebody else that same night.
Sergeant Dokes makes sure of that. He follows me everywhere now, a human bloodhound incited by the scent of darkness.
Fans have argued about Chino for years, and the version most of them land on is that he never outsmarted anybody. He just showed up on the worst night of Dexter's life. There's one more name that belongs here, and I'll come back to him. Hector Estrada does physically get away from Dexter in Season 7, but he never tears through anything. Dexter cuts him loose himself, and Estrada only reaches the water because there are cops closing in on the container. That isn't muscle beating the ritual, it's something a lot smarter, and it's coming up. And the show patches both of the physical holes almost immediately. Dexter learns the drug math, gets better rooms, gets stronger restraints, and picks places nobody wanders into. Which means the one method that doesn't need Dexter to cooperate with you is also the one that runs out as the franchise goes on. There's even a theory in the fan base that Chino getting loose is the luckiest thing that ever happened to Dexter, because if that kill had gone the way it was supposed to, he'd have been out on the water at the exact wrong time right when a certain pile of remains was getting pulled up. His most embarrassing failure might be the thing that kept him out of a much bigger fire. So fighting your way out gets you a few minutes and then a body bag. But there's a second group of people who never had to lay a finger on him, because something outside that room did all the work for them. What happens to those people is a lot stranger than what happened to these two. The second way to beat the ritual doesn't involve you at all. Dexter needs privacy more than he needs anything else in that room, and the whole thing falls apart the moment another person walks in. Sounds simple. It isn't, and the show proves it by running the exact same test twice inside one episode and getting two opposite answers. That episode is Dexter. New Blood Season 1, Episode 5. Dexter is tracking down whoever sold the drugs that nearly killed his son, and it leads him to a guy named Miles O'Flynn. He gets close, he gets the needle in, and the ketamine is already going in when police show up out of nowhere.
Are you Miles?
Dexter doesn't finish, he doesn't even try. He drops the entire plan mid-motion, rebuilds the story in his head on the spot, and sells it to the cops as a regular fight between two guys who don't like each other. Miles walks away from that with a needle mark in his arm and no clue how close he came. Same episode, different man, opposite ending. Dexter gets Jasper Hodge into a room and starts the confrontation, the whole photographs and questions routine he's been doing since he was a teenager. Then Logan turns up, and Dexter is out of time. He doesn't run, and he doesn't let Jasper go. He forces an overdose on him, stages it so it looks like Jasper did it to himself, and leaves. And then there's the biggest version of this, which isn't an accident at all. In Season 7, Episode 11, Maria LaGorta pulls a drug kingpin named Hector Estrada out of prison for one reason. She knows what Estrada did to Dexter's family, she knows Dexter can't leave that alone, and she wants to be standing outside whatever room he builds. It's the only time in the whole franchise where a cop builds a trap out of Dexter's own ritual, and it works. Her officers hit that shipping yard with Estrada still breathing. Here's the part that should worry you if you're ever the one on the table. An interruption doesn't stop Dexter, it just changes what he's willing to do to you. Jasper is proof that getting caught in the middle can make your death faster and uglier, because the ceremony is the part Dexter gives up first, and the killing is the part he gives up last. Miles only lives because Dexter hadn't gotten far enough in yet, and the interruptions cost both sides. That needle mark in Miles's arm doesn't disappear. It ends up as a piece of the case that starts closing in on Dexter later, so the same moment that saved Miles is also the moment that starts eating Dexter's cover in Iron Lake. LaGorta finds the whole prepared room in that shipping yard, plastic and all, and it still isn't enough to end him, because a room with no body and no Dexter standing in it is just a mess in a container. The real problem with this method is bigger than any of that, though. Nobody on that table can make it happen. Miles didn't call the police any more than Jasper paged Logan. You're sitting there waiting on a coincidence while a man with a knife stands over you. Which means everything in this section is luck. And luck isn't a plan. The people who got out of that room on purpose all had one thing in common, and it's something Dexter wants badly enough to put the knife down for. Once you know what it is, this whole section turns into the cheap knockoff version of it. Now let's get to the people who made Dexter untie them with his own hands, because this is where it stops being about escape and starts being about trade. Dexter doesn't only want you dead, he wants things from you, and if what you've got is worth more than the kill, that table turns into a deal you didn't know you were allowed to make. Two men worked this out, and one of them got closer than anybody in the franchise to using every method at once.
Showing me the way.
The first is Aaron Spencer. At the end of Dexter, Original Sin. Season 1, Episode 9, Spencer is a captain at Miami Metro, which already makes him the worst possible target, and he's secretly behind Jimmy Powell's kidnapping and murder, plus the abduction of his own son. Dexter has him. Rooms built, tables ready, and by every rule Dexter follows, this man qualifies twice over. He lets him go anyway, not out of mercy, and not because anybody talked him out of it. Spencer's kid Nikki is still alive and stashed somewhere, and Spencer is the only living map to where that is. So Dexter frees him quietly, lets him think he got away with something, and follows him straight there. He gets Nikki out in the finale, then he kills Spencer, once the man has stopped being useful. The second is Hector Estrada, back in that same shipping yard from the LaGorta trap. This is the man who ordered the murder of Dexter's mother, so this is as personal as the show ever gets.
Estrada, it's time.
Dexter brings up being 3 years old in that container with her body, which is not a conversation you have with somebody you plan on letting walk. And Estrada beats him anyway with one piece of information. He tells Dexter a police captain arranged his release from prison. That's it. That one line flips the whole night because Dexter is smart enough to hear it and understand that he isn't the hunter in that container anymore. He cuts Estrada loose and tries to drag him out of there, and once the cops flood the yard, Estrada breaks away from him and goes over the edge into the water. Information, a punch, and an escape in the same scene. Nobody else in the franchise pulls off all three. What Spencer and Estrada both hit is the slowest part of Dexter's whole process, which is his need to know things. He can't just do it. He has to understand it first. Understanding takes time, and time is the only thing a tied-down person actually has to work with. Every question Dexter asks is a door he's leaving open a little longer. There's something else buried in the Spencer case that's easy to miss. After Dexter picks the kid over the kill, Harry tells him he was right. Harry, the man who wrote these rules in the first place, signs off on Dexter bending them. That's the moment the code stops being a list of instructions and starts being something Dexter gets to read however he wants, which sounds like growth right up until you think about it, because a rulebook that bends for good reasons is going to bend for bad ones eventually. And I should be honest about the ceiling on this method. Being useful is a delay, not a rescue. Spencer dies by Dexter's hand, and so does Estrada, one episode after his big swim. Chino went the same way. Everybody who beats Dexter with strength or with leverage is still on his list when it's over, which means every method I've covered so far has the same expiration date stamped on it. So, if you want out for good, none of this saves you. The people who walked away and stayed away didn't break anything physical at all. They broke something inside Dexter's head.
And the dark passenger?
And there are two different ways to do that. The first one doesn't need you to be clever, or likable, or even innocent. It runs on a set of rules Dexter didn't write. The strongest lock on that room turns out to be the only real key, and it's the Code of Harry. Everybody talks about the code like it's the thing that lets Dexter kill people. And it is. But look at it from the table instead of from his side, and it becomes something completely different. It's a list of reasons he isn't allowed to touch you. More people have walked out of a kill room alive because of that list than because of any escape attempt in the franchise, and there are 3 separate ways to fall through it. Start with Robert Brunner, Season 5, Episode 5. Brunner is a violent sex offender who used to share a cell with Boyd Fowler, and Lumen Pierce is certain he was one of the men who held her captive. His face fits. His record fits. Dexter grabs him and starts getting him ready, and this is way past the point of no return for most of Dexter's targets. Then Dexter finds his monitoring history, and it makes it flat out impossible for Brunner to have been there. So Dexter puts him back. Alive. And here's the detail that matters. Brunner is not a good man, and the show never pretends otherwise. He just didn't do the one thing Dexter was about to kill him for. The second way through comes 2 whole seasons later with Joe Jensen, the Phantom Arsonist. Dexter has him, and then the conversation goes somewhere he wasn't expecting, because whatever shaped Jensen as a kid lines up uncomfortably well with what shaped Dexter. So Dexter cuts him loose. But he doesn't just let him wander off. He knocks him out, and then anonymously points the police right at him, which might be the only time in 8 seasons Dexter hands a killer over to the actual justice system instead of handling it himself.
Dumb fuck must have passed out from the fumes.
He's still alive.
The third way is the newest one. Dexter, Resurrection Season 1. Episode 8, and the target is a landlord named Vinny Valenti. Dexter builds the room, gets him on the table, runs the whole routine, and it's all just for show. Vinny is a slumlord, letting his tenants live in dangerous conditions, and Dexter decides being a terrible landlord doesn't clear the bar for what happens on that table. He uses the room as a threat instead of a sentence, cuts him free, and tells him to fix the building. Vinny runs out of there and slams straight into Angel Batista, who walks into a plastic-lined room seconds after the man who built it walked out. 3 men, 3 different holes in the same system. Dexter had the wrong guy with Brunner. He had the right guy but decided the punishment belonged to somebody else with Jensen. And with Vinny, he had a guy who simply didn't qualify, no matter how much Dexter didn't like him. Brunner is the one that should keep you up at night because Dexter got all the way to the setup on a hunch in somebody else's memory. If that monitoring record had been filed differently, or if Dexter had been in a rush that day, an innocent man ends up in bags at the bottom of the ocean, and Dexter goes to work the next morning like nothing happened. The private courtroom he's built has 1 judge, 1 prosecutor, and 1 executioner, and they're all the same guy on the same bad day. And Batista, standing in that empty room, tells you the other half of it. Working out the truth about Dexter has never been the hard part. Dokes figured him out on his own. Deborah watched him finish a kill in a church. Lagerta guessed his next target before he'd even picked it, and Batista followed him right to the room. Every one of them was correct, and being correct almost never survives contact with him, but all three of these code cases have one thing in common, and it's a big one. Every single one needs Dexter thinking clearly. There's a whole other version of this where he isn't, where the man on that table walks out for reasons that have nothing to do with rules or evidence or what he deserves. That's the last method, and it's the only one that has never failed. Not one person who used it ended up back on that table. It's also the reason Dexter loses the person he loves more than anyone in the world, and if you stop here, everything you just learned is missing the piece that actually explains why any of it works. So here's the last one, and it's the only method with a perfect record. You don't argue your way off it, and you don't prove he's got the wrong guy. You make Dexter feel something about you, and once that happens, the ritual isn't a ritual anymore. It's just two people standing in a room full of plastic. 4 of the clearest examples pulled this off, and all 4 of them walked out of that room. And the show goes out of its way to make sure you understand that not one of them deserved to. The first is the guy I mentioned way back at the start, the one Dexter failed to kill on the same night Chino got loose. Jimmy Sencio is a blind voodoo priest who poisoned 3 people with ricin and set it up so their deaths looked like his curses coming true, which makes him about as clean a target as Dexter ever finds. Dexter gets him on the table and then just stops. He can't do it. He's coming apart after killing his own...
I can't kill this man. Harry wouldn't want it. And neither would I.
brother. A detective is watching him every hour of the day, and standing over Sencio, he finds out that the machine he built only runs when he's holding himself together. So he lets him go, and then he takes the blood slide he'd already collected and washes it clean, which is the closest thing to an apology Dexter has ever performed. Sencio walks out of the franchise, and the wiki still lists his status as unknown. Then, Zach Hamilton, in Season 8. Rich teenager kills a woman named Norme Rivera, and Dexter grabs him thinking he's about to kill his own father. On the table, Zach explains himself, and what comes out is that he was trying to protect his mother from what his father was doing to her. Dexter looks at a kid who kills for reasons he understands and stops seeing a target. He sees a younger version of himself, and by the end of it, he's agreed to teach the kid his own code. Then Hannah McKay, and Hannah is the one everybody argues about. Back in Season 7, Dexter has already confirmed she's a poisoner who kept killing after her partner went to prison, so by the code this is settled before it starts. Hannah wakes up tied to that table and does absolutely nothing the room is designed to make people do. No pleading, no panic, no bargaining. She more or less tells him to go ahead if that's what he thinks he needs to do. And that one reaction takes the whole ritual apart because the entire thing is built to produce fear, and she won't produce any. Dexter cuts her free, and they end up having sex on the table he built to kill her on. And then the last one, which isn't even a captive winning. Season 8, Episode 11. Dexter has Oliver Saxon strapped down in Saxon's own treatment room, everything ready to go, and he realizes he doesn't want to do it. The urge isn't there anymore, because he's got Hannah, and he's got Harrison, and there's a whole life sitting in front of him that doesn't include any of this. So he calls his sister and asks her to make the
Arrest him. Take him in.
Arrest him? He's still alive?
arrest. Look at what all 4 have in common. Not one of them touched a restraint, and not one of them got lucky with a knock at the door. They got out because of something happening inside Dexter, and that's the only method in this franchise with a perfect success rate. It's also the most dangerous thing in the show, and the writers make sure you know it. Hannah doesn't stop being a poisoner because Dexter decided he wanted her. Zach doesn't stop being a killer because Dexter decided to mentor him, and he kills again. And then Oliver Saxon murders him for reasons that have nothing to do with any of it. Saxon should end the argument about whether Dexter's mercy is a good thing, because a deputy marshal lets him out, Saxon kills the marshal, and then he puts a bullet in Deborah Morgan. Dexter had him on a table with everything ready and chose not to finish, and the price of that choice was the one person whose love he actually needed. So here's where all of this lands. The plastic isn't the strongest thing holding you down, and neither are the straps. The strongest thing in that room is the story Dexter tells himself about who belongs on the table, and that story's the only part of the whole setup with a crack in it.
Like who? I mean, did you do what you do with any of them?
I took care of some of them.
Every person who ever got out did it by getting into that story instead of getting out of the room. Fans have argued for years about whether any of his targets ever really outsmarted him, and the honest answer is that nobody did. Dexter is the only weak point Dexter's ritual has ever had. He built a room to keep his killing separate from his life, and every time somebody walked out of it alive, it was because his life had already gotten in. So, if you ever end up on that table, forget the straps and forget waiting on a siren. The 5 methods all point in the same direction, which is that the further you get from Dexter's body and the closer you get to Dexter's head, the better your odds get. Fighting works twice in 4 shows, and both men are dead inside a week. An interruption might save you, or it might just make your death faster and quieter, and either way you can't cause it. Being useful buys you days. Falling through the code gets you out the door, but only while he's thinking straight. And making him feel something about you works every single time it's tried, which is exactly why it's the one nobody can plan for. The code, the plastic, the photographs, the table, all of it was supposed to make Dexter reliable. What it actually did was hide the fact that the whole system runs on one man's judgment on one particular night. Catch him on a good night and you're a name in a slide box. Catch him on the wrong one and you walk out of a plastic room into the rest of your life. If you want more Dexter breakdowns like this one, the next video is already up on screen. Go watch it.